Hello, and welcome to Spiritual Becoming. I'm your host, C.L. Christoffel, and I want to speak today on several topics that come together. The upshot being how spirit moves in the world, how spirit moves through our lives, through chirological time as opposed to chronological time, through synchronicities as opposed to coincidences. But I'd like to start today talking about causality, cause and effect in our lives. The ideas that it's possible for acausality to happen in the world. It's possible for that chirological event to happen where the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the Great Spirit, Sat Chitananda, comes into our lives and literally changes the course of our understanding and our becoming. But in so doing, we need to look at Sat Chitananda and understandings of what that wholeness is, what that totality of spiritual being is. Often we talk as spiritual aspirants about predestination, things written in the stars. There's fate and destiny that predetermines where our lives will go, that perhaps we were writing in our own Akashic record before we were born how we want to live our lives, where we'd like our lives to go, and perhaps we were writing with Spirit the novel of our life to unfold. And moving along that line of thought, perhaps those synchronicities, those chirological events, are Spirit coming into our lives and kind of plucking us up and moving us back toward that spiritual line, that flow that we were supposed to have, that we thought we ought to have as we were writing the history of our life. But that, of course, is only if predestination is factual and happening. Only if fate and destiny are real. It's just as possible that we are living out lives of free will, that we're falling through circumstances, that impossible situations goad us forward, drive us forward to become wonderful people or terrible tyrants. And we are completely, in an existentialist sort of way, in control of what's happening in our lives. And there is no synchronicity, there is only coincidence. There are only mathematical probabilities, there is no chirological time or events. If you weigh those two perspectives, I think you come in contact with the spiritual leaders of the world versus the scientific, the mathematical leaders of the world, and that age-old clash happens personally for you in your life. What I'd like to look at today, and maybe, showing my hand a little bit about spiritual becoming, about these vlogs, is my belief, how I would like to see the world. So let's begin with a discussion of causality and acausality through the prism of predestination. As my opening comments suggest, let's open the topic. Strict determinism. Strict determinism implies just one possible future. On a macroscopic level, this could be true. the primal holon, the largest container, or the uncontained presence, the thing that can't be named, but we often name it, God, just might foresee all of the outcomes and just might make adjustments, like a cook, to the recipe. These adjustments are made through our lives in moments, in time. These adjustments are made by small awakenings, by small events. But what I would like to look at in looking at these events that happen is the causal line of the movement of our spiritual selves through time. And when we look at cause and effect, what we find is events are not strictly caused. Events are uncaused because circumstances or eventualities are set into motion prior to events happening, making all events uncaused. Events that are already in motion. These already in motion series of events can start new causal chains. It's called soft causality, meaning that something that's already happening bumps into something else and makes a new happening. And sometimes we come into contact with those things that are happening, and we find the fork in the road, and we're asked to make a decision, and we choose either right or left or center. And in that choice, we come into contact with a decision tree. And these decision trees then map out the course of our lives. It is possible also that events collide with each other, causing not more events, but a complete stoppage. This doldrum is a chance meeting. This coincidence or synchronicity creates an opportunity. It's like the moment of truth. I spoke a little earlier about chirological time as opposed to chronological time. Chirological time systematically moving us through our lives with these important spiritual events that lead us back to our original path, our original purpose, our original calling in this life. These moments of truth, these chirological events, although synchronistic, they still could be technically uncaused events because forever comes before them. But instead of leading to a complete new chain of events, they lead to that stoppage. And it's different than just a decision, leading to another decision in a decision tree. These are the times of deep self-reflection. These are times of deep spiritual understanding, of knowing, of understanding. Like Terence McKenna says about knowing the wiring under the board, the reasons for our reasons. when these events happen, I think it's important to recall them, remember them, catalog them, and even assign them meaning. Many people think of them just as coincidences, and that's the scientific, mathematical, rational, doubting Thomas side of our human nature. But let's think for a moment of our spiritual, theosophical, theological, philosophical side of our human nature for a moment, and assign meaning to those events. There's something to be said for non-empirically believing the world is miraculous. Einstein once said, there's only two ways to see the world, as though it's miraculous or as though it's not. And essentially, that's what we're talking about in a discussion of causality versus acausality. It's what we're discussing when we're discussing the difference between predestination, that your life is mapped out before you were born, or free will, the idea that you have control all the way through. And when you come to those decision trees, you kind of flounder and fall through life, making your own decisions through trial and error, rather than Spirit coming into your life in synchronistic moments, offering you guidance. I think if you look back across your life, invariably you'll see the difference between your mind working on a given problem and those moments of just knowing. And if you open yourself to those moments of just knowing, to the movement of Spirit, I think invariably they happen more often. I think you can coax the Holy Spirit or the Great Spirit, you can coax the attention of Satchitananda your way, and perhaps move you, back onto the path, onto your calling, or perhaps just to give greater meaning to your life. I'm not one for predestination. I tend to be skeptical of it, but I think under my free will is still a river. Like my free will is a boat on the river, and I can move and change and grow within the confines of the boat in my own decisions, but the river, the Spirit, is still moving me, through life, toward important events, toward becoming. I think that's the purpose of all of our lives, to seek happiness, but also to seek a greater understanding. That is the flow of the river. That is the Spirit moving in our lives. And maybe that's not strictly, fate or destiny moving or predestination moving in our lives, but just simply a more open spiritual purpose in our lives, being that we are spirits, in physical form. Perhaps it's just part of our nature to align back with the larger mind, the super mind again, like Aurobindo Ghosh talks about. So let's look at chance, such as this chance meeting we're talking about. It could be synchronistic, it could be coincidence, or meaningful beyond mere chance. Chance is an interesting concept. Chance means that the future is open, and yet unpredictable. Chance allows alternative futures. And the question becomes how the one actual present is realized from these potential alternatives. The one actual present teeters on every instant, and it's never strictly predictable. We are the uncaused then of events. With our thoughts, we are the beginning point, a catalyst. We have the ability to think and then do, but forever the outcomes are murky. The future is unclear. But we are simply a part of those Aristotelian causal chains traced through all of human history, jostled to and fro in our lives by chance outcomes deriving from our every decision. The key to understand is that there's no certainty in outcomes. There's only a gradation between 0 and 1. You might look at me and say, well, there are, very specific laws that happen in our universe. Laws are certain. Laws are certainties. Well, I would say laws like, for instance, gravity, they're nearer to 1, but they're not perfectly 1. Somewhere in the gradation between 0 to 1, we know that gravity will act in certain and specific ways around bodies, depending on the mass of that given body and whatnot in space. But that doesn't mean that it will act specifically and exactly the same in a cause and effect sort of way each and every time. There are just so many variables that we can't expect even that law to be specifically certain. People don't like that. Lots of people don't like that thought. For people who cannot live with ambiguity, this math game is a game it's important to play. They want so much to be certain of outcomes. It's pretty easy to identify people who can't live with this sort of ambiguity or this sort of uncertainty. They're often upset, they're anxious, trying to control the uncontrollable processes of life and death on Earth. These sorts of people can be unsettling, even domineering, perhaps even dangerous. Business, medicine, technology, etc. rely on certainty and a precise cause and effect being nailed down. This need for perfect certainty of outcomes at times puts people against each other, even puts people against nature. I think that on the continuum of 0 to 1, people realizing or not realizing fully that nothing has a certain outcome, trying to pin down these very specific outcomes, we end up missing things. It is cruel to some extent to work to build a world of certainty in a universe where there is none. But
people will forever work to straighten out pillars and floors, even to the point of warping them, so that the eye imagines them to be straight. This sort of certainty about things, this need for everything to be plumb and level and very humanized, dehumanizes everything else in the world. Show me straight lines in the world. Show me perfectly plumb and level trees and land. These human conceptions, these human needs for perfection, for certainty of outcomes, these scientific and provable cause and effect needs are worrisome. I think that's probably why I'm wanting to discuss this today, is because I think it's important for us as humans to open up the idea that perhaps being out of control is important, and maybe even just to allow the Spirit to move in our lives, to think about things in a wholly other way outside of ourselves and our needs for control. That perhaps there's a greater control, a greater love, a greater purpose that wants to give us divine fullness and spiritual becoming, wants to give us good and comfortable and healthy and practical, observances of beauty and peace and purpose in our lives. Like Wittgenstein said, I act with complete certainty, but the certainty is my own. It's hard for us to meet, on any sort of level playing field without someone being the boss, without someone wanting, taking, stealing the upper hand, wanting power over someone else, wanting to have certainty of outcomes, at least for themselves. But one's best laid plans can be left decimated at once. It happens all the time. When one thinks one is in control, is when one becomes ill with power. It's like setting up your car, packing everything in your car for a grand vacation, drawing out on all the maps, plotting out the route, plotting out the hotels and all of the national parks that you want to see along the way, and the family that you want to see along the way, and everything is set up. All of the money moved to the right bank accounts, or setting up traveler's checks, or whatever. Everything is ready, everyone's packed into the car, you move down to the end of the driveway, bam! Someone runs into you on the road and your plans are over, decimated at you. The key here is, it is possible to create an acceptable outcome or result. It is possible to give attention, pay attention, be attentive, and to work toward outcomes, but they're not indeed ever perfectly assured. We can give a reasonable proximity of assurance for many things, but we can never determine outcomes perfectly. And I think this is where we need to relinquish our idea of control. There's a saying, let go and let God. It's a serious bumper sticker cliche, but the idea holds true. Let go and watch for the movement of spirit, the kind hand, the loving hand, the spirit moving to move you forward in life.
And so we come to it. What can move outside of space and time? What can move into your life and offer you knowing, offer you a moment of enlightenment? All of the sages, all of the gnanis, all of the enlightened people talk about these flashes of inspiration that they had or have. And we discuss about keeping them, having them all the time. That's enlightenment. Being in the flow of spirit. Making that chirological event, that synchronistic event, last. Outside of cause and effect, outside of the causal, projections that happen through these chains of events, outside of predestination, outside even of our own free will. And if we talk in terms of letting go of our ego, letting go of our attachments to the world, that's often how this discussion is opened. How can I have bliss? How can I have ananda all the time? How can I have spiritual understanding all the time? I think the purpose of predestination is to move everyone toward that, but possibly even outside of predestination, we are, to move toward that like the boat on the river of spirit. Perhaps that is the purpose of all of our lives, is to come to that understanding, come to that fullness. There is a primal first cause, the large whole on, the beginning, the container of all things. The beginning. Everything goes back to creation. Everything goes back to the Big Bang, or the beginning of our universe. All of these chains, these causal chains of events that move us forward in our lives, go back to that one beginning. That's where the idea of cause comes from. And I want to look outside of cause. I want to look at spiritual events, synchronistic events. I want to somehow lend to you the idea that there's more to life than just falling through it. That the larger mind does reach out to you and does live to give us, you, me, all of us, purpose in our lives. So what we have to do is look back at the primal cause, the beginning. is a container of infinite expansion. Time is a container of infinite duration. It's a universe around us of space and time. But what comes before space and time? What comes before the container? What is uncontained? Nisargadatta talks about the idea of acausality, saying that it is a real happening in the world. That sometimes things happen that are uncaused. Sometimes people are healed through the laying on of hands, through prayer. Things just happen. Through the petitioning of spirit, through the movement of spirit, things just happen. Can't be explained through causal chains of events. In order to understand this, we have to see the beginning. We have to see the end of space and time and our place in it. The beginning is a place of nothingness. Nothing. Nothing wakes up and moves step by step toward fullness, wholeness, toward the 10,000 things, the becoming, toward everythingness. Toward everythingness. Somewhere in between the awakening of the universe, the awakening of God, the awakening of us and our lives, we are somewhere in between nothing, nirvana, and everything, Brahma. And in between, we search for purpose, search for meaning. And these events stack up in our lives in these causal chains, moving us toward understanding for some purpose. Spiritual becoming, this vlog, is my opportunity to try to explain more fully my understanding of our purpose in this life. And I look forward to making another video. I look forward to making a long series of videos that try to open these questions